What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Tragically Hip for the first time in a while. Thank you to Yvonne, who has not only made available the Yer Favourites compilation, but made available Phantom Power, which is from 1998. Now, I have reacted to a handful of tunes on this already, so the first one in the playlist that I have not reacted to is Save the Planet. It's the kind of phrase that, on the surface, few people would take issue with or have a problem with. Most people would pledge support to the idea in practice or in premise or in principle, perhaps best, but I do feel like it's the kind of phrase that is used rhetorically by people whose actions are actually quite destructive or who have political or economic or psychological ill designs or malfeasance in mind when they say it. It's the type of phrase that can be used to mask destructive and or exploitative actions, though again, in principle and on the surface of it, most people, not all people, I suppose if you have a rapture type of view, you might even be waiting for the world to cease to be or to fall into ruin because that's part of your teleological chronology. But again, for most folks who live here on the planet, we don't want it to be destroyed or fall into ruin, and thus the idea of saving the planet would be seen as an admirable and desirable goal. But of course, even among folks who view the phrase more sincerely and genuinely, the prescription with which to pursue that goal or outcome is up for debate, and different people will have different ideas, and some of those will contrast or conflict with each other. So yes, I do wonder how directly we're talking about planet, meaning planet can and most likely would be Earth itself, but of course there are ways of talking of worlds that are not necessarily about the physical world, a world meaning a particular culture or society. But of course, I would be inclined to maybe see the phrase as more direct or literal here. I'll try to catch what I can. I will, of course, observe that a number of their songs I became familiar with through Yer Favourites seemed to function on multiple levels where there were specific points of reference and yet themes or ideas that you could extrapolate more broadly, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case here. Let's give it a listen. This is the Tragically Hip. The track is Save the Planet, and it's from their 1998 album, Phantom Power.
Constitution's a granite, can't save the planet.
Yeah, what a crazy tune. So, first of all, like, even though it was only in the latter stages of the track, the flute, I think that was a really surprising and yet perfectly fitting sonic element. Obviously, there's some great guitar work in there, especially in the like solo section, and then like the final quarter of the tune, it continues to flare and flourish. But even the earlier parts of the song had great drive and energy. It's a rocking track, which, again, given what I've heard from them on the double album compilation, is no surprise to me. But they really just have this mixture of folk rock meets alternative rock meets, what's the right way to phrase it? It's like pop rock, I think, is going too far, but there is a catchy appeal to a lot of the sonics. But again, they have this more like rural attitude in some of the sonic configurations, but there's also an edge to it. So again, it sounds a bit alternative. So somewhere in the nexus of those different genres, I think, is where their real wheelhouse is, as my brain has come to hear it. Almost again, like maybe indie rock, like on the spectrum of indie and pop rock, like somewhere in between, if that makes sense. But okay, so I really don't know what's happening, but I do feel like there's some visual imagery that is probably functioning as metaphor. What's it like, the guy walking down to the water, but he's like covered in dust, and there's granite, I think, is a reference. There's a reference to a bunker, but then there's a couple of phrases that seem to refer to like transitional spaces, the idea of being on a, like, what was it, periphery town, so like a town that's out on the frontier, which is a border between the known and the organized and the unknown and the uncertain or the wild. There was a line about like going to the chain link fence, which again is like a barrier between somewhere where you're allowed to be, somewhere where you're not, and you can see through but you can't pass through. So I feel like there again is some imagery that's likely referencing conceptual ideas more broadly. I do feel like there was a specific phrase, save the planet, but I think it was like a, not necessarily a critical take, but a suggestion that maybe it's not going to be possible, which again, if you're talking about bunkers, which I suppose bunkers can have different meaning, but in a more like technical sense, a bunker is a shelter where one is taking refuge against destruction and perhaps, planet level violence outside, and a maybe indication that you're doing your best to survive in a time when it's not easy to do so, and if that's the case, then the planet is probably in trouble. So yeah, I do feel like there's again some lines that are likely metaphorical, but that speak to maybe a more literal understanding of saving the planet or not, and perhaps, based on human nature, or at least the decisions of people who have power to either save or damage or destroy the world. So yeah, and again, Gord's vocals very energetic, and in fact like a bit eccentric here in a good way, but it was like he was going through the lines not in like what you would consider the normal rhythmic pocket, but he was sort of, speeding and slowing and sort of going around the expected placement of the vocals. Like his rhythm was deliberately not in exact coordination with the percussive rhythm, which I enjoy because it made me focus on what he was doing vocally even more. But again, he just has a very charismatic voice, and I think that comes across in this tune. So I'm looking forward to going through the parts of this album that I haven't already reacted to. Thank you again to Yvonne and Todd, or even David, any of you who were following the Tragically Hip playlist or deep dive before. Hopefully you find your way back to this video and beyond. So let me know what you think. And Luca, who is sitting here very patiently and calmly below, and whose ears perked up when I said her name, she and I will see you next time. Peace.